understand. Now, when we are talking about the brain, when we are talking about the vascular pathology, let us understand what is the circle of Willis. Okay, so there is something called as aortic arch. We know aortic arch. Aortic arch gives rise to a lot of arteries. One of it is uh, the internal carotid artery, which is divided into internal carotid and the external carotid, which I am trying to, hopefully you can see my cursor. So this is the internal carotid. Okay, there are two internal carotids. Okay, then this internal carotid gives rise to a branch, which is the main branch, which is known as the middle cerebral artery, and the yellow color which you can see is the anterior cerebral artery. So these are the two arteries which take care of the anterior circulation of the brain, full anterior circulation of the brain, which controls majority of the function of the brain, is being supplied by a middle cerebral artery. And there is a yellow color, this is anterior cerebral artery. And you can see if it is anterior towards the frontal lobe, that's why the name is anterior cerebellar. It is in the middle, and that is a reason why it is known as a middle cerebral artery. This anterior cerebral artery is again connected by an anterior communicating artery. So that means there is always a chance that if a one side anterior cerebral artery has some pathology, the other side anterior cerebral artery and the anterior communicating artery can give us a collateral circulation, and that's why the patient may not land up with a full-blown symptom related to the brain or the lobe which has been damaged, which is in turn supplied by the anterior cerebral artery. Then similarly, middle cerebral artery is there, and this is about the anterior circulation. Now we talk about the posterior circulation. As and when the aortic arch gives out the branches, there are two vertebral artery which is ascending from the vertebrae, and then at the base it combines, both the vertebral arteries combine and form a basilar artery. This is another red color, this one. You can see this is a basilar artery. Now this basilar artery, as it is ascending in the brain, it gives rise to branches to the pontine area. These are known as pontine arteries. And then there is a superior cerebellar artery. And then it really ascends up, and then it gives rise to a posterior cerebral artery. So we had anterior, middle, and posterior cerebral, and below the posterior cerebral there is a superior cerebellar artery. Cerebellar artery means it is supplying the cerebellum. Okay, so this is the circle of Willis. Now the middle cerebral artery and the posterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery and the posterior cerebral artery is connected by a posterior communicating artery. So here the beauty of the circle of Willis is, if there are minor embolic phenomena because of this interconnected circulation, there are chances that the collateral circulation may be formed easily, and the person may not land up with a full-blown symptoms. It all depends on what is the intensity of the thrombus, or what is the size of the thrombus or the emboli. But if it is a minor, smaller embolic phenomena, it can be tackled by the formation of the collateral circulation. So I'll just share some of the videos also.
So we have two vertebral arteries, they join.
Can you see this video? Is it audible?
Two vertebral arteries, they join to form the basilar artery, and lots of branches. That is your 10 branches.
So here the video is showing that there are two vertebral arteries. It goes and forms the basilar artery, if you can see it. Okay. Then as it progresses up, there are pontine arteries which have been given. Just as it ascends up, there is a superior cerebellar artery. Okay. And above that, there is a posterior cerebral artery. There is an interconnection with the middle cerebral artery. So this we should remember. Why?
Superior cerebral artery, and finally the terminal branch, which is the posterior cerebral artery. The posterior cerebral artery in turn is connected posterior communicating artery. And the internal carotid artery then gives the middle cerebral artery. So this is the middle cerebral artery, and it also gives the anterior cerebral artery. And the anterior cerebral arteries are connected to each other via the ACOM, that is the anterior communication.
So hope you have understood, because this forms a base of understanding the pathology. This is another video which I would like to share.
So, as you can note, the MCA is supplying a significant part of the lateral surface of the cerebral hemisphere. So this entire part is supplied by middle cerebral artery.
So now imagine we have learned the circle of Willis. Amongst the circle of Willis, the anterior circulation major artery is the middle cerebral artery. Now you can see this pinkish color area. This entire area is being supplied by middle cerebral artery. So imagine the amount of quantum of the brain is being supplied by the middle cerebral artery. So if there is any pathology related to middle cerebral artery, so imagine the amount of brain damage it can produce and the various dysfunction it can produce. So just have a look at it.
Except for the frontal pole. The frontal pole and the superomedial margin of the frontal and parietal lobes. This is supplied by the anterior cerebral artery.
So now this yellow color portion, you can see the frontal lobe and the superior medial portion of the frontal and the parietal lobe is been supplied by the anterior cerebral artery. So understand the quantity of quantum of brain which has been supplied by anterior cerebral artery.
And then the inferior part of the temporal lobe and the occipital cortex. This is supplied by a posterior cerebral artery.
So this is something which is in blue. The inferior portion of the temporal lobe and the occipital lobe is supplied by the posterior cerebral artery. And it is mentioned that posterior cerebral artery, the occipital lobe where there is a visual cortex, some part is also supplied by...
A point of note over here we have the occipital pole. Okay, so always remember that the occipital pole, which actually represents the macular vision, has dual blood supply. It's supplied by both the posterior cerebral artery as well as the middle cerebral artery. This is the reason why we get macular sparing in occipital lobe infarcts. The reason why we get a macular sparing in occipital infarcts is because of the dual blood supply. Both posterior cerebral artery and the middle cerebral artery supplies the occipital pole.
So the moral of this particular thing is that if the occipital lobe has got a dual supply, first of foremost, both the posterior cerebral artery is supplying, and above that it has a middle cerebral artery. So even if the person gets an occipital infarct, the person lands up with visual loss, but the macular area is preserved. So that is what the meaning is. Macular sparing means macular area is preserved. The central vision will be there, but related to other thing, everything is lost. So that is the meaning of macular sparing,